When Pastor Moody gave his life to the Lord, his zeal in the spiritual endeavors grew quickly and soon matched the diligence he applied to his business dealings. In time, Moody's passion for ministering to people, particularly the poorest children of Chicago, grew to a point where it was a challenge for him to divide his energies between church and business. While Moody still lacked in personal spiritual development and ministry skills, he experienced tremendous success in his church work. And as a result, the very demands upon his time grew greater. What's more, he sensed God's calling upon his life, a calling for him not just to serve the Lord, but to make it a full-time occupation. Some 25 years later, at a Christian workers' conference, Moody related the struggle in this way, and he said, "When I came to Christ, I had a terrible battle to surrender my will and to take God's will. When I gave up business, I had another battle for 3 months, and I fought against it." He writes, "It was a terrible battle, but oh, how many times have I thanked God that I gave up my will and took God's will." In 1861, Moody made the decision to step out in faith and leave the business world. All through the first half of the 1860s, he was actively involved in numerous avenues of ministry, including the YMCA, speaking to Union soldiers in Civil War camps, and in 1867, again, Moody struggled when he felt God calling him. This time, the call was to take his ministry beyond the city of Chicago. Then there was another time when God was calling me, he says, into higher service, to go out and preach the gospel all over the land instead of staying in Chicago. He wrote, "I fought against it for months, but the best thing I ever did was when I surrendered my will and let the will of God be done in me." He wrote, "If you take my advice, you will have no will other than God's will. Make a full and complete surrender." It was from this time onward that Moody's ministry would never be the same, experiencing continuous explosive growth in the decades to come. The key to Moody's tremendous business success was his all-consuming drive to be the very best at what he did. And though in his early years of ministry he had much to learn, there's one truth he recognized immediately. Any work done for the Lord ought to be carried out the very best of our ability. As Moody said, when God gave Christ to this world, he gave the best he had, and he wants us to do the same. Thus, Moody went from pouring every ounce of his energy into building up treasures on earth to building up treasures in heaven. Just as he had held nothing back in his ambitious pursuits in the business world, he now held nothing back in his spiritual endeavors. To him, doing anything less was unthinkable. And then there's total surrender to God. Total surrender to God. Moody's conviction that Christians ought to live in total surrender to God was reinforced in the early years of his ministry while in England. There he heard British evangelist Henry Varley say, "The world has yet to see what God will do with and for and through and in and by the man who is fully and wholly consecrated to him." Moody thought to himself, he said a man. He did not say a great man, nor a learned man, nor a rich man, nor a wise man, nor an eloquent man, nor a smart man, but simply a man. He thought to himself, I'm a man, and it lies within the man himself whether he will or will not make that entire and full consecration. And he wrote, I will try my uttermost to be that man. Henry Varley's encouragement had a tremendous impact on Moody, who, because of his lack of education and ministry training, faced frequent reminders that, from a human perspective, in many ways, he was inadequate. Yet as he came to realize that it is God who does the actual work of ministry, and that the most effective channel for ministry is a wholly surrendered life, he resolved more than ever to avail to himself completely for the Lord's use. All through his years of ministry, Moody shared these discoveries with his fellow believers and constantly urged them to fully yield their lives to God. He wrote in his journal, "One of the sweetest lessons we can learn in the school of Christ is the surrender of our wills to God's will, letting him plan for us and rule our lives. I cannot look a day into the future," he wrote. "I do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. In fact, I do not know what may happen before night, so that I cannot choose for myself as well as God can choose for me," he wrote, "and it is much better to surrender my will to God's will." The first thing a man must do if he desires to be used in the Lord's work is to make an unconditional surrender of himself to God, he wrote. He must love this, I love this. He must consecrate and then concentrate. A man who does not put his whole life into one channel does not count for much. And the man who only goes into work with half a heart does not amount to much. It seems, he wrote, about the hardest thing to get to the end of self, but when we have gotten to the end of self, and self is lost sight of, self-seeking and self-glory thrown aside, and Christ and his cause are uppermost in our hearts, how easy it is for God to use us. Not only did Moody urge that Christians make themselves fully available, but he warned of the potential danger of half-hearted service. To illustrate this point, he would speak of when God called Abraham to leave Ur of the Chaldees and go to Canaan. And he wrote, "Then Abram came to Haran, which is about halfway, and stayed there. We do not know just how long, but probably about 5 years." He wrote, "Now I believe that there are a great many Christians who are what might be called Haran Christians. They go to Haran and there they stay. They only half obey. They are not out and out. How was it that God got him out of Haran? His father died. The first call to leave Ur of the Chaldees and go to Canaan, but instead of going all the way, they stopped halfway. And it was affliction that drove Abram out of Haran. A great many of us bring afflictions to ourselves because we are not out and out for the Lord. We do not fully obey him. God had plans he wanted to work out through Abram, and he could not work them out as long as he was there in Haran. Affliction came, and then we find that he left Haran and started for the promised land.